You're listening to the Kevin Lang blog. Today, I interviewed Dave Birkett of the Detroit Free Press. He's also a contributor for the Sporting News. Dave joined us today to talk Lions football, about the upcoming camp battles, about some of the economics of Ndamukong Suh's contract situation, and we also touched on Titus Young and how he's been doing and any updates with that. So, without any further ado, here's my interview with Dave Birkett. You can find him on Twitter at Dave Birkett, Birkett. Joining me now is Dave Birkett of the Detroit Free Press. How you doing, Dave?
I'm good. How about yourself?
Not bad. This year is really different for the Lions because we have a lot of camp battles. I was wondering which ones stick out to you the most?
I think the most important one is probably at right tackle, and that's the one that I think will probably go throughout training camp. You know, Jason Fox and Corey Hilliard both have a legitimate shot to win it. You know, Corey played a couple years ago when Guys Charles was hurt. Jason Fox hasn't played much at this point in his career, but he's shown some promise in a little bit of time that he's been healthy. And, you know, I think that's one, like I said, it's not going to be decided until the pads come on, and we're going to have to see how these guys play the first couple weeks of the preseason.
Right. Well, what's your outlook on the young cornerbacks? I know we got Greenwood and Jonte Green. They were both kind of banged up, and Bentley, he was out. And then we added Slay to the mix this last draft. You got to see him, huh?
Yeah, no, I think all three of those guys and four of those guys, should be in the playing group. But, the way I see it, I think the Lions will probably keep 6 cornerbacks. Slay's a guy that has a shot to start if he's right, if he's healthy. The Lions took him in the second round, but I think a lot of talent evaluators thought he was a first-round type of talent, and the Lions were fortunate to get him where they did. That was just that knee injury that held him back. And fortunately for the Lions, he was back on the field by the end of the off-season program, got a little bit of work in. Bill Bentley's a guy that I think is going to play a big role this year. Even if he doesn't start, you're going to see him in nickel situations. Another guy, obviously, that had some injuries last year. And then Green and Greenwood, both a little bit more developmental guys, but they both have the size the Lions covet. They could be in the playing group, but I think for the Lions' sake, I think their best defensive backfield off the bat would be Chris Houston, Bentley, and Darius Slay.
Okay, a couple more position battles. How do you see safety shaking out? I know Delmas, I don't know, his knees. I think it's a chronic thing there with that. And Spivey, he really kind of hurt himself getting in trouble this offseason. But, I mean, I'm not sure. They brought in Chris Hope, but how do you see that shaking out?
No, yeah, I think you're probably looking at Glover Quinn and Don Cherry are your starters right up the top. Lewis Delmas is healthy. Obviously, he's going to be in that mix, but that's a guy that hasn't played in 7 months. I mean, since the season, he didn't do anything during the off-season program, and so I think he's going to be on the field, and I'm sure he'll play plenty this year. You still got to wonder how many games he's going to last because of the knee problems that he has. So Don Carey's probably the first one in. He's a guy that the Lions coaches grew to trust a little bit last year. Played well at the end of the season. Was out there with the first team all off season, so he'd get first crack at that. Amari Spivey, Chris Hope, I think those guys will both be in the mix. But I don't know if there's going to be room for everybody. I mean, you got those two. You got Ricardo Silva. John Welling's been a special teams guy. They're one of those guys who's going to end up on the free agent, on the street as a free agent. And, I think that's, again, going to come down to camp when the pads come on, who's going to go where.
Right. And the last position that I'm looking at is tight end. Do you think Tony Scheffler could not survive this camp?
I think I've had a little bit different take than most people on this, and that I think Tony Scheffler is going to have a role on the team this year. He's I know a lot of people have looked at Joe Saforia and Mike Williams and the contract situation and thought that Tony could be on his last legs here, but I think Tony's still a valuable asset to this team. And I think for a team that's expecting to win now, that wants to win now, I think it'd be a mistake to get rid of him. I think Foria has some potential. I think he's a guy that if the Lions decide to keep 4 tight ends, and I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I think that's something that they could do, just based on the it's all going to come down to the back end of the roster and what they want to do with those couple developmental spots that are there. But I think Scheffler's still going to have a role. I think he's too valuable to let go. And at this point, I know people, like I said, have made stuff about the contracts, but money doesn't really play into it at this point. That money is spent. There's nobody out there to get in the free agent market, and the Lions do have a little bit of additional room for any emergencies that arise thanks to redoing Matthew Stafford's contract.
Right. Now, I want to hit on Ndamukong Suh's contract. Next year, he's due to make quite a bit of money. Isn't it close to 20?
Well, that's his cap number. I think his salary is about $12 million, but yeah, his cap number will count about $20 million against the cap next year.
Okay, I look at the best, nose tackles and defensive tackles like Nada and Wilfork, and they make about $8 million a year. And you're saying next year is take-home money's 12. So my thing is, like, they're either going to have to agree to a long-term deal, or do you think that they could possibly, depending on how he plays this year, do you see them ever trading him?
Well, I guess next year if they get the sense that they're not going to bring him back, that could be one of the possibilities. But no, I think right now the Lions are still in a position where they want to keep talent on the roster. They're not in the position to be getting rid of it, especially on the defensive line and pass rusher. So, I would foresee that the Lions maybe this offseason approach Ndamukong Suh about a long-term deal. Whether that can happen this offseason, I think remains to be seen. He said himself at the end of May that he probably wouldn't be entertaining those talks until 2 years from now when he's a free agent. So, I think the Lions, again, it's going to be tough to keep 3 guys that make the money or could make the money that Suh, Stafford, and Calvin Johnson do. But, if this team wants to win, they need players of that caliber on this team. So there's no really easy solution for it, but I think Ndamukong Suh is the Lions this year and next, and perhaps beyond that.
Okay, so you think then that he'd be worth the money? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think definitely for next year, I don't think that it'd be worth it for the Lions to give him up, especially when they're in a position where they're trying to win. If something goes terribly wrong and they're in a rebuilding situation, maybe you look at things a little bit differently. But no, I think Ndamukong Suh is one of the best defensive tackles in the league. I don't have any clue right now what it's going to cost you to sign him long term. But I think if he's the money that he would make next year is $11.55 million. I think that's right at the wheelhouse of where the top 5 defensive tackles would be, and I think he definitely has the talent to be one of those guys.
Right. Okay. Now, as far as the future of Schwartz and Mayhew, a lot has been made of this season being kind of make or break season for these guys. Do you see that? Do you see the Fords? I mean, Schwartz could get fired. I mean, a coach could go, but do you see them letting go of Mayhew? It took 10 years to get rid of Millen.
I think best case scenario is the Lions are making the playoffs, and you don't have to worry about any of that at the end of the season. I think both of those guys realize that what they did last year didn't do their job status any help. But this is a team that when people inside the building look at it, they think has a chance to compete for the playoffs. And I think anything short of that would be a disappointment. And I think if they do that, I think both guys are probably should come back for another season together. I mean, I think it's easy to forget, how far far this franchise came from 0-16, and last year was obviously a step back. But if they can get anywhere close to 2011 and what the team did, I think those two guys deserve some of the credit for that.
All right, I got a couple more for you, Dave. Linehan, his play calling seems to be pretty predictable. Like last year, I never understood why he never once put Bell and LaShore in the backfield at the same time. And he runs at least one reverse a game. Do you feel his play calling needs to change this year?
No, well, I think, Reggie Bush obviously gives him a different dimension, to the offense, something that he didn't really have last year, without John Best. And I think, look, the Lions, they'll probably use a little bit of two-back this year with Reggie Bush, just Mikel LaShore or somebody like that in the backfield. And they can split Reggie out, basically get defenses or try to get a defensive base package on the field and then spread them out a little bit, take advantage of that. But I don't think the parts were there for him to do that last year. I don't think, historically Scott is not a two-back guy. I think we know what Scott Linehan is and what his offenses are, and he likes to throw the ball and he likes to stretch the field. I think he has some weapons to do that. If we look back, Linehan caught a lot of flack early last year, including fielding some questions from me about why Calvin Johnson wasn't getting the ball more. And by the end of the year, Calvin Johnson set an NFL record for receiving yards and had a career high in receptions and everything that went along with it. So Scott Linehan, inside the game is a pretty respected play caller. And I think having Reggie Bush, having some healthy receivers this year, I think he'll be able to do a little bit more than he did at the end of last year.
Okay, Dave, you're close to these guys. You see them often. I don't know how much you've seen them since they did not bring back or they fired or however that situation played out with Sean Jefferson. But I know that he was really, really well liked by Calvin especially. And do you think it's going to have any impact on the receivers?
I do. I think Sean Jefferson was a really good receivers coach, and kind of like I said, Scott Linehan's, rep across the league is as a pretty creative play caller. I think Sean Jefferson's reputation across the league is as a really good receivers coach, and a guy who related well to players at a position that's not easy to connect with all the time. And look, I don't think Calvin's going to take a big step back. He's the best receiver in the NFL, and as much as Sean Jefferson played a role in him getting where he is, Calvin he's going to be just fine. But no, I think not having Sean Jefferson on staff, I think that's a negative overall for the team. I thought they were better with him. But at the end of the day, that's Jim Shorts. He had final call on his staff, and he decided he wanted to part ways, and so the Lions, got rid of him or moved on from him, I guess I should say, along with a handful of other coaches.
Yeah. All right, my last one here is you're pretty close with, at least you've been in contact with a lot, with Titus Young's high school coach and his family. And have you spoken to anyone lately and seeing where he's at and how he's doing?
I haven't in a while. I've been on vacation for a few weeks here, and the last couple calls I made, the Titus family hasn't been returned. I think it appears to be pretty obvious by what's going on in the courts that he's getting some help for some of the mental problems that have ailed him, whatever the reason behind that is, be it concussions or something else. Again, by the fact that the judge hasn't required him to be there if they're not showing up the last two times for his court dates. I think it's safe to say that he's getting some help, and frankly, that's what he needs, and I think that's what everybody wants. Was for him to kind of get right, because it really is a sad situation. He's was a talented receiver, is a talented receiver, and I think that's truly what the Lions still miss on the receiving core this year is a number two, a guy like that who's fearless across the middle, who can stretch the field, who has some of those skills that he had because he was a real talented guy, but obviously not one that's going to live out his potential on the field now. So hopefully, I'll be in contact with some family here soon. I've talked to them a bunch of times since the beginning of the year, but a first-hand update on what's going on with him.
Okay, I lied. One last one, since you brought that up. Do you see the Lions, now that they have a little more money? Do you see them possibly bringing in a Winston Justice or a Brandon Lloyd?
No, I don't at this time. I think they're, what you see is probably what you're going to get with the roster. I mean, they do have that money available kind of as an insurance if they need something. But I think right now you're going to see Fox and Hilliard battle it out for right tackle. If we get into camp and it's 2 weeks in and one of those top tackles hasn't signed anywhere and the Lions have some additional concerns, maybe they make a move there. But for now, I think it's wise to let those guys play it out. And receiver, Brandon Lloyd, he had a pretty good year in New England, I know. But I don't, there's been some questions about him in the locker room. I think that's the last thing the Lions need after, what went on last year. And, frankly, Nate Burleson, Ryan Broyles, those guys obviously have different skill sets than Titus Young. But if they're healthy, I think the Lions still have enough weapons in the passing game outside of Kelvin Johnson that they should be able to compete for a playoff spot.
Well, Dave, I really appreciate you doing the interview with me. Hopefully we can catch up later on down the road, maybe a couple games into the preseason or something.
Sounds good. We'll do it again.
All right, thank you, Dave.
Yeah, no problem, man.